All right, let's get going. Yeah,
Ready.
we got to stop talking Christmas. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we skipped Thanksgiving.
Yeah, first we have to get through Halloween, then Thanksgiving, then Christmas. So but right now we have to get through Isaac. Yeah, Isaac. So this is our first lesson in our study of Isaac, which really, goes well with Abraham. So we're going to be discussing Isaac today. Chapters 24 and 25 of Genesis. 24 and 25. So if you look at chapter 24, the first verse of chapter 24, what is the setting of this chapter? When is this?
We're in the twilight of Abraham's life.
Okay, yeah. He's old. He's old. He's advanced in years. That's a nice, polite way of saying that. Advanced.
He had
He's
many years.
full of years.
Some of us are there.
Yes, he died full of years.
We weren't getting there.
Full of years. So this is towards the end of his life. Now, what is his concern? What is happening in verses 1 through 9? What is his concern here?
To find a wife for his son Isaac.
To find a wife for Isaac. Okay. So how is he going about that?
He's going to send a friend.
Send him out to find. Well, he prays about it before he going out.
Okay. Who's the he that's praying about
The
it?
servant.
The servant. So Abraham is sending his servant to go find a wife for Isaac. Okay. And this is the interesting part. Where does he say to go to find the wife?
Back to his home country. Where's other
Back to his home. Okay. Which would be where? Where?
Only over by over in Mesopotamia.
In Mesopotamia, right. Because remember, Abraham, that's where he came from. And he left there to come to the land of Canaan. So what else is interesting to you about the fact that he's sending his servant to go back to his homeland? And what else does he say to him about?
And my relatives.
To my relatives.
His clan.
It's all relatives.
Right, right.
What I thought was interesting, he's sending him, but he doesn't want Isaac to go back.
Why does he not want Isaac to go back?
Doesn't want Isaac to stay there.
Why, he says that. He says why he doesn't want Isaac to go back. In these verses, 1 through 9.
Five is, then I must take my son back to the land from which you came.
Yeah, I put the question.
It has to do with the oath. You take my son and I will give you this land. And is he thinking if I take my son back there, you're going to take the land?
Right, right. Because look at verse 7. What was Abraham's answer to the servant about, should I take your son back there?
It reminds me of the promise. Oh, this land of Canaan, that's the
Right.
land. Oh, okay.
Remember way back in Abraham when he made that promise to him and he said, leave your home and go to this land that I will show you. And this land will be the land of your descendants. So Abraham's remembering that, right? He doesn't want Isaac to go back to his homeland because God gave him this land. So it makes sense. See, so what is Abraham? Think about Abraham and these things. What is Abraham remembering? That promise, that covenant that he made, right? So he's like, no, you need to go find a wife for him and bring her here because this is what God gave us. And what does that tell you about Abraham, especially after last week's chapter about the sacrifice of Isaac and where his faith is?
He was trusting in God's promise.
Right,
Completely.
right,
And following, is
right.
obeying.
And obeying, right.
But I have a question, because why is it okay for him to do this step, but it wasn't okay for him to take Hagar, to have a baby? Well, why didn't God bring the girl, Rebecca, to him? You see what, he's doing something, he's taking a step
Yeah,
that God didn't tell him, go send your servant to this place. You see what I'm saying?
Well, because
Sometimes
God
the
had
steps
said,
are okay.
no, but God had said that he would have a son through Sarah.
I don't
That he would have a son through Sarah?
Through Sarah.
Yes.
He said he will have a son. But I don't know that it actually says from Sarah.
It does. When we did Abraham, because, yeah, and from Sarah, there was, in the chapter where he said, you will have a son this time next year, and said it to Sarah.
But that was after you already had a baby.
No, that was after Hagar,
Right,
right?
right.
But he said, remember, he said, no, this is not the heir. The heir will come from you, your own body, and through Sarah.
Right,
Okay, and that was Isaac.
right.
Okay, what am I not getting?
Because in the beginning, God had promised him a son, and then years and years and years and years went by, and he didn't have a son. And so his wife said, here, take Hagar
Yes.
and have a son.
Right,
So he took a step on his own to
Right.
create the son.
She took the step.
Or, yeah. or
Okay.
whatever, yeah.
She stepped out of God's perfect will, time, and plan.
But
She
why
was
is
listening.
this not out of God's perfect will? Why can't he send his servant to Mesopotamia?
I think because of the family line. So Isaac needs to marry someone from the family line.
But God could have brought the
He
person
could have.
to.
He could have.
Rather than
Okay.
Isaac Abraham taking a step
Yeah.
to find a wife for him.
Okay, so keep that question in mind, and let's look at what does God do in this situation.
Because in
Okay.
a sense he did.
Okay, in a sense, he did. How do you mean?
Because as the servants pray,
Right?
and as soon as the servant get there, and his Rebecca coming, and everything happened exactly how the servants prayed it to happen.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Mhm.
in a sense, everything happened exactly how.
Right.
So the servant prayed, Rebecca came in exactly what the servant prayed for. Rebecca did exactly that. And he knows that this is you are the
Right.
woman.
Right. You are the one.
Yeah.
So you see, God did make it happen. But from that land. No, he didn't say to Rebecca, you leave your land and your family and go. So essentially, he did say that by sending the servant. So because when you look at, it's a long story in chapter 24, all about finding a wife for Isaac, right? And it's all of the narrative about, like what Ketsia was just saying, about how the servant said, okay, I'm going to go. And, the main points are, like, don't take Isaac back there because God promised this land. So you've got to go there and find a wife for him and bring her here because the descendants have to be in this land. Okay, that was the covenant. Okay. So then it happens exactly as they say, and here's an interesting about the servant's prayer. Before we move on, look at that servant's prayer. What do you see about that prayer?
Well, it's very detailed.
Very detailed, very specific. Very
Because he
specific.
wanted to be absolutely sure that this
Mhm.
was the right.
Right. Right. And again, it's like before he finished speaking in verse 15, before he finished speaking this prayer, Rebecca comes along. And what does she do?
Is everything specifically he prayed for?
Everything that he prayed for.
And she was pretty.
And she was pretty.
And there were 20 camels, and they drank 10 gallons of water each. That's a lot of water.
Okay, see, that's a lot of water. That's a good
I was
point.
impressed by that. I don't know why that's written in my Bible, but
Yeah.
somehow nonsense impresses me. But
Yeah.
that's a lot of water.
Well, it's not so nonsense when you think about, what she's doing, her showing her hospitality to him. And yeah, she says, yes, I will give you a drink. And besides that, I will get water for your camels. Now, camels drink a lot of water.
10 gallons each.
So she had to draw a lot of water. So that was going above and beyond.
I kind of laughed at verse 21. It said the man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey as not. Like, what more are you asking for? It's exactly what you prayed for. Verse 21.
Okay, he gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not.
It's like staring in disbelief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
And
happening.
then- what I was thinking was,
Yeah.
she's done A, B, C, and D, and she's pretty too. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jesus.
And I just asked. I just now
Wait a
asked.
minute, but it was to the God of Abraham, it's
Right.
not to his God yet.
Yeah.
Maybe he
So-
was a
But-
believer.
It does give you a little picture, like it makes you think, like when it says gazed at her.
Oh.
You know, like,
Like, wait, I want her for me. Yeah.
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 The girl
Let's
shows
just,
up.
so that's what they look at you, kids.
Yeah.
Can she draw water too?
Yeah. But you can see, I mean, he's got to process this. He had just asked for this specific thing, and then it happens right before his eyes. You know, so she is fulfilling everything that he asked for. And after this happened, what was his response to the answer to prayer?
You worship.
Yeah, he worshiped. He worshiped, okay? He worshiped God and thanking him for that prayer, the answer to that prayer. So what do we learn here about prayer?
You can be specific.
You
don't
can be
just have to
specific.
general.
Yep.
You can be specific, and I think God likes it. It's another, when you communicate to Him, when you notice and acknowledge. A lot of times we pray for His stuff, and I
Yeah.
don't think that we acknowledge what He's given us, even if it's just, hey, pray that we'll, make it this week and be safe, and You'll keep us safe. And it's like we don't acknowledge, hey, You did that for us. So
Yeah.
maybe if we're more specific,
Mhm.
we can ask for anything.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, it's like how many times do we actually thank God for what he
right.
Yeah.
did after we asked him?
I feel too, sometimes like I put God in a box and I just think, well, He's not gonna do everything I ask.
Mhm.
So I'll just pray for a part of it, like, and not setting myself up for disappointment, like, I've been disappointed before,
Yeah.
not by God, but by
Yeah.
people, and
Yeah.
I've asked for things and I've not gotten what I've asked for, so sometimes I don't allow God to like do all the details, and care about those details, and I know He does, but,
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, no, this is proof, like He can
Mhm.
take care of all of those little tiny details.
Maybe why the servant was gazing, like, am I really seeing what I'm seeing?
Yeah,
You know?
right.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
I think it also helps, like, I think God likes proving that there was no other way but it was Him.
Right.
Mhm.
And like, it kind of comes back to Sarah and Abraham, like,
Mhm.
there was no other way that they were going to have a kid except by God's
Yeah.
showing up. And
Yeah.
here He does it again because He's prayed so specifically. You have no other way to say this was anyone else doing. This was me.
Yeah.
So.
On page 4, in question C about prayer, I wrote, the Bible encourages us to ask and even plead for our most personal and important requests. God wants to answer, but sometimes we just don't ask. Then He may withhold His answers, 1, in order to deepen my insight to what I really need, or 2, to broaden my approach and my appreciation for His answers, or to allow me to mature in my thinking. And when He answers, how will I use the gifts and the blessings that He's given? So those 3 things, like
Yeah.
sometimes He withholds it so I can appreciate it, or He wants us to ask specifically. And when you say to people, how can I pray for you? Oh, I'm good.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? You have nothing,
Yeah.
And I think we just don't want to ask the details.
Yeah.
But He wants to give us the details.
Mhm.
It's like we say to our children, what do you want for Christmas?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
My kids give lots of details about that one.
And all of us grandparents love it. Do not say, I don't care, because then you get a stocking full of X-Spray like you did one year.
Yeah, so he wants to give,
So I don't-
and we just don't always believe that he will, And it's like, you think about not Isaac, but Abraham, when he had to grow in his faith to get to that place in chapter 22 where he totally believed God. I totally believe you. And now you see that still playing out in this chapter with Abraham saying, no, this is what God said, so you need to go get her from my homeland, but don't take Isaac. Okay, don't take Isaac there, because God said this. The other thing that shows something about Abraham, if you go back to we are in chapter 24, but verse 7, what do you see about Abraham's faith there?
Well, he's giving details that haven't happened yet, like but he's having faith that that will happen, the angel of the Lord.
Because the servant is questioning, well, what if
Right.
she doesn't come? Okay. And he says, no, God said, to your offspring I will give this land, and he will send his angel before you. And you shall take a wife for my son from there.
This is like he learned his lesson. Like, I will not deviate from what he says anymore.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
He
yeah.
says, this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah, that's what I mean, is like you've seen his growth, and even here, in this next step, he's showing that faith. God will send an angel before you. I know this is gonna work, you know. So the servant is like, well, what if it doesn't? But he's like, no, it will. It will, right?
But in verse 8, he always told him, then if she doesn't follow you, then you're free.
Then you're free,
Don't
right,
worry about it.
right. Then you're freed from this
Yeah.
this covenant. Put your hand under his leg and,
That was
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, right,
Don't keep looking for it. Just if it doesn't happen, just
right, right.
Don't touch another.
Yeah. It's like, I know it will, but, yeah, I'm not gonna hold you to it if it doesn't, so. Okay, so here's another thing. So she feeds the camels, and then he asks, do you have a place to stay in your house, right? Well, he asks, who do you belong to, right? Okay, why was that important? Yeah, it had to know it was a family. Was it family?
This is a cousin,
Yeah, it's a cousin, you're right.
first cousin,
It's a cousin,
Thank goodness they didn't
Yeah.
have a weakened DNA.
yeah, yeah.
Nahor's.
Right, and so because we're doing that genealogy chart, we can see exactly, when you see the name, you see, well, that is his brother, Abraham's brother. So this is his cousin, Isaac's cousin. So definitely the family, definitely the family. 20, so they go to the house, and I want to get to what happens. So she goes back to the house to tell people about this man, right? And what he said. So how does that all play out?
I was surprised though. It's her brother and not the father that's beginning the steps.
Yes. And I read up on that because it's like in that culture, it was the brother who gave the sister away for marriage. He was the one responsible for that.
That happened often in our house.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we did this.
Yeah.
That's
In our
right,
culture,
because
that
in
wouldn't
our
work
culture,
so
the
well.
father
Yeah.
was the one who
Yeah.
made that big
Yeah.
decision. Like, the
But you
father
see
didn't.
you see Laban's part in this,
Yeah.
right? And how he was the one who was giving permission. Right? So it's not the same, like, I wouldn't trust my brother to do that for me, you know, I wouldn't.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah. But look at this. When they explain to the family about, you know, because he said, I'm not going to eat until I tell you why I'm here, right? And they explain to the family, and then look at, so all of that is explaining everything. And then in verse 50, what is their response? Yeah. Yeah. They understand, where's this coming from? From the Lord. And so what do they say? The thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you either good or bad. Interesting, right? We have no say in this because it's from God.
Even they can't refute his prayer.
Yeah, right. So they recognize that it's God doing this. And they're like, we can't, what do we have to say, you know? But they approve. So they're like, go ahead, take her. And then what happened? Who wanted her to stay?
The mom and brother.
Her mom.
That's another part I was laughing at. So it's like, finally, she's gonna go back. But they're
Yes.
like, no, we wanna keep her for 10 days.
Yeah, just
And
stay
so
here for a little while.
She
you
might
know.
change her mind, who knows,
Yeah.
so I was thinking.
But the servant says, no, please, release us now, we need to, and she agrees. She agrees. So they ask her, do you want, and she agrees to go. So she's being obedient to this. And she agrees to go. And they send her off with a blessing. And interesting because they said in verse 60, what did they say? What was the blessing in verse 60?
May you become thousands of 10,000s.
May you become thousands of 10,000s.
And may you possess the gates of those who hate him. Like, that's exactly what was said earlier.
Right. That's part of the promise, the covenant. You will have descendants as many as the stars, and I will curse those who curse you. So see, that all connects back to those verses in Genesis about the promise and what God said he would give them. So they go off. How does the chapter end? In 62 to 67, how does that end?
He was having his nightly vespers.
Oh, yes.
Love at first sight.
Love at first sight.
What?
Yeah.
Pretty lady, right?
Yeah. Well, of course, he knew that the camels went off to bring back a wife. And so when he sees the camels coming, then he goes out to meet her. And what is she? She says, who is that man coming? Right? Who is that?
That last part, was weird. So he was comforted by his mother's death.
Yeah.
Comforted after his mother's death.
Right.
Yeah, right.
After,
Yes.
Because he had a female.
He had, yeah. He had a wife. Yeah. Yeah. So immediately they become husband and wife. And that
That is just very precious.
Mhm.
That's a sweet
yeah.
portion of scripture. Go ahead.
And it's fulfillment of the covenant. Yeah.
That's exactly what Bill thought too, right?
Oh, exactly what Bill thought. Right. Right.
It was that camel.
Yeah. Yeah, let's not go there. Yeah. So this is, you see the fulfillment of the promise to Abraham through Isaac. And now because through Isaac, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. So the promise is coming through Isaac, not through Ishmael, right? So now Isaac has a wife. And now we can start having the descendants. Okay, now how soon after he has a wife do we start having the descendants? We're moving into chapter 25. A while. So we're looking, 20 years. So we're looking at verses starting with 19, because the other verses we looked at last week with Abraham is just listing the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Abraham's third wife. So we talked about that in the last session with Abraham, and then Abraham died and was full of years. So now we're looking at Isaac. So this is verse 19. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son, and Abraham fathered Isaac. And Isaac was 40 when he took Rebekah.
And he was 60 when Isaac and Esau were born. So
Okay.
20 years.
So he was 60 when the boys were born. So there's again 20 years of not having children after he married. Kind of like who?
His father.
His father. Kind of like his father.
I was thinking of the similarities between the barren of the two women too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's something in during those period of time. It's like that familiarity of
Mhm.
women cannot have children, but at the same time, how important having children was.
Right,
doing
right.
that.
So what did Isaac do because she was barren? What did he do?
Great.
He prayed.
Great.
He prayed. Okay. He prayed, and what was the, so he prayed because she was barren, and what happened? Okay, God answered that prayer.
So
Did-
I'm going back to Abraham, his father, when he found out Sarai was barren, he didn't pray, right? Did he just say, "We'll take your handmaiden"? So I'm just going from an example.
Oh,
that he
right,
learned.
right, because, there's a
Maybe
learning,
I'm wondering if
right.
he shared that with us on what happened, and if he learned not to do that, so now he needs to pray and trust God.
yeah, he may have
The whole Hagar
that history of Abraham and how he tried to handle the barrenness
on his own.
on his own and didn't go so well, right? So now, but Isaac is like, I am going to talk to God about this. Okay. I'm going to talk to God about this. And God grants his prayer. So did God open any other wombs that we've looked at?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we've seen that he's able to open and close wombs. And so here, after he prays, then Rebecca conceives. Now, what's going on now with Rebecca now that she is pregnant? What happened? She's having difficulty with this pregnancy. So what does she do?
She prays.
She prays. Okay. There's another lesson about prayer, right? Who do you ask first when you don't understand something? So she prays. What's going on here, God, right? And what does God say to her?
Surprise.
Surprise.
You're gonna have
Surprise, twins. Twins, okay? But what is significant about what God says to her?
There are two nations.
They represent two nations. There are two nations in you. And what else is significant?
It'll be divided, and one will be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. That's the significant part.
Okay, that's the significant part. The older will serve the younger. Okay. So you looked up some cross-references. No, let's not go there yet. Let's talk about these boys when they were born. When they were born. Who are they? Okay, Esau. And how's Esau described?
He was a red, hairy man.
Hairy cloak.
A hairy guy, right? I have a picture in my head that's far beyond what this I think says. Okay, I'm sure. So he was, and then how about the second one? What does it say about him?
He was holding onto the heel of his brother.
He comes out holding onto the heel of his brother. Okay. Now, what do we learn about them as they grow up?
Esau was
Skillful hunter,
Skilled hunter.
man of the fields. Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob.
Okay,
They had
Isaac loved
favorites.
Esau, and Rebekah loved Jacob. Why did
Jacob
Isaac
was
love?
Sneaky.
What's that?
He was sneaky. Some of your birthright.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get to that.
Rebecca was sneaky too.
Oh, yeah.
Encouraged him and all,
Right.
you know, I mean,
Yeah.
really, it was.
And
There's quite a different picture that they paint. Jacob was a quiet man dwelling in tents. Like, what does that mean?
Well, because his brother was out hunting.
Right, right.
so one was a homebody,
Yeah.
one was a little bit more
But
quiet,
that,
one was a cook, one
that
was.
means like he had several tents that he lived in, so I don't know.
He doesn't like being outside.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, he's more the indoor guy. Esau's the outdoor
He's
guy.
my brother Doug, whereas
Yeah.
Esau would be my brother Andy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes. Right. Just different temperaments. Right.
I think the biggest lessons I've learned in that one is how God knows exactly the character even before they were born.
Yeah.
Like he knows exactly who they're gonna be.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and he worked with their character, like the change of the character.
Mhm.
It just made me think of, we were born sinful, and God knows each of those babies' character before they were even born.
Mhm.
But that doesn't change the fact that he's gonna work with that. He can transform
Yeah.
that into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It just amazes me.
Yeah. Right. And even their names
The
represent
names,
their
yeah,
character.
the
Right.
Specific character,
Mhm.
who
Yeah.
they're gonna be.
And God said to her, the older will serve the younger.
Yeah.
Before they were ever born. I'm tempted to jump into Romans let's do that.
So was there really any choices there if the older was gonna serve the younger? I mean, it was all just gonna play out.
Okay, let's talk about this. When Esau comes in and says, I'm starving. I've been out hunting, and he obviously didn't have a good day hunting. And he says, I'm starving. Okay, let me have some of that. Let me have some of that soup. And then Jacob says what?
Give me your birthright.
Some of your birthright.
So he bribes him.
And he really didn't think much of the birthright. He really did. I mean, he was gonna get double the inheritance according to what they said about birthrights, and he was gonna be able to be the head of the nation. And he didn't respect, I mean, Esau did not respect that birthright. And he didn't think, so when it ends there, it says he despised his birthright.
Mm-hmm.
And the other guy just, Jacob's a little conniving. What was his motivation was my question. We know what he did, but what was the why behind the what?
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't really know, but what we know from Scripture about Esau and what kind of a person he was. And that's where we see that in Romans. Okay. In Romans 9, what do you learn about Esau and this whole situation?
One more.
It's on page 9. Ouch.
Saw you struggling, sorry.
I appreciate it.
So Romans has given us a commentary on Genesis. Trying to find what it says here about Esau. Okay,
Well, verse 13.
verse 13.
Yeah.
Where does it say he was a godless man?
Oh,
Yeah, that's somewhere else.
Oh, is that in the cross references?
Yeah.
Okay, right, okay, so that's in the cross references. That's why none of us can find it. Okay, and that's on page 6, the cross references.
Yeah, but I guess because he didn't get it, what the birthright was. But they are twins, and Jacob probably resented the fact he was born second. I mean, it's seconds after, why,
Okay,
why
let's,
does he get it all?
yeah, there are things, let's talk about what does it mean to be the firstborn, and what does it mean about the birthright? What did you gather from these cross references about that?
The firstborn male is consecrated to God, including the male of livestock.
Okay, and what belongs to the firstborn?
A double portion.
A double portion of inheritance.
All the preeminence and the kingdom is given to the firstborn.
Mm-hmm. So the birthright, the firstborn, the birthright is a big deal. Okay, it's a big deal. And what does it say about Esau and what he was willing to do? Or like Barb said, he didn't respect it, right?
He was godless and sold his inheritance right for a single.
What
woman.
verse is that?
That's in Hebrews.
Okay, that's Hebrews. Okay, I totally lost sight of that. Yeah,
Sexually
Page 9.
immoral, unholy, and sold his birthright for a single
Right.
meal.
right. So there was that about Esau, that he really didn't have respect for the birthright. And just, I'm hungry, I'll sell it for this.
Immediate, he was gonna take care of his immediate need. I'm hungry, I don't care about what this means. He didn't think about the consequences of what this action was going to do, because there was no respect for that position
Right.
in his family. So this is a man that probably, here we have his father, who is this godly man, who is obedient and to the Most High living God. And this kid is he's on a prodigal way. So it's,
But maybe he may have known, Rebecca may have told him what God told her, you're gonna be serving your younger brother. And so
Yeah,
what's the
Rebecca
value?
knew. Rebecca knew. He says, I'm going to die anyway, so, yeah.
So that's my question. If, let's say he didn't feed him and he would have died, wouldn't Jacob still get the birthright then since he's the only one living?
He would have, it would have gone to him.
So he would have died and had the birthright and not dealt with his brother, or he would have lived and had the birthright and been.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yes, right, I think he was a little exaggerating, yeah. But,
Was he really gonna die?
I am starving.
Okay.
I think he was
Yes.
To me,
Right.
it made it sound like he was gonna die if he did.
yeah, well, he made it sound like that, yeah.
That's a good point, because like when you, I try to think of Esau's mindset, and like he has been a man of the field, he's been out in nature, he sees life as it comes and goes, he knows you have to kill to survive. Like he doesn't see the longevity of building a house and what does the foundations have to do, like he doesn't see how generation after generation, I mean, he grew up with the family, so he knows from what he's learning, but he doesn't care because he sees what life is, and it's just all gonna turn back into dust. So he's like, what do I care about a kingdom when I know I need to feed myself? I know I need, like, I have immediate needs. My offspring, I don't care about them. I don't even know if they're gonna be there. Like,
Yeah, but and let's bring this all back to what did God say to Rebecca before the babies were born?
That one was gonna serve the other?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that the older was going to serve the younger. So, and it goes back to what you said about how God knows their character.
She favors him. I'm thinking Esau's
So-
probably feeling rejected and all, you know. He may have been feeling, you know, your mother, one of the things is she hated him.
Right.
So
He
what's the
actually-
value?
Right.
She hated
Esau.
Esau, yeah. And that word is strong. It's not the same as what we say we hate something. So when you would, if you looked it up, it would just be like it's not like I hate you. It's she chooses Jacob over him. Prefers, right.
And I feel like it all go back to, God knows already those two boys,
Right.
who's gonna be the one who's really gonna deserve to make that generation, that promise.
Right,
moving
right.
forward.
See, it's going to be Abraham, and then it's going to be Isaac, and then it's going to be Jacob.
He acted on impulse.
And then you're going to have from Jacob the 12 tribes, okay? So God is choosing,
Which one is gonna?
God is choosing, he chose that Isaac would be the one, not Ishmael. He chose that Jacob would be the one, not Esau. To carry on the promise. See, it's all about the promise, the covenant. Again, to get to, this way, to get to here.
And I also have to say, even right there, even the firstborn usually is how, sometimes, God's like, it's the best, it's not always tradition.
Mhm.
Even in that
God's
sense.
choice in
It's
the end.
not
Right.
always tradition, it's God's choice.
Right, and that's what we see in Romans.
Yeah.
But did you see other people in your, other firstborns who relinquished their birthright because of their activities?
Yes.
Okay? So Reuben was not listed as the firstborn in the genealogy because he despised his birthright, okay? He rejected it by his actions. So it's not, while this is important, the birthright, but it's like it's not always in that order. Okay? And look at Romans, what it says in Romans as the illustration. And he's quoting in verse 11, verse 10. And not only so, but also when Rebekah had conceived children by one man, our forefather Isaac, though they were not yet born and had done nothing, either good or bad, in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of the works, but because of him who calls it. Okay. And God told her, the older will serve the younger. And it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. And again, that word hated, it's not like I have nothing to do with him, I hate him. It's like I choose this, but I don't choose this. So then the question is, what shall we say then? Is there injustice on God's part? No way, no. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. So it's all God's choice, okay? And some other place in Scripture, I was looking at this where it says, I'll have mercy on who I want to have mercy on, okay? But that doesn't mean, I think it's like you think I should have mercy on this person. I will have mercy on who I want to have mercy on, okay? Even though that's not in agreement with what you think.
Because he's in charge and he's
So-
God. I guess he can choose.
So-
It's his to give.
What's that?
It's his to give, and he's
Yeah.
God, you know, and we're
Yeah.
not. And
Well,
he
and we
can
don't know
choose.
his greater plan, you know, like, he had a greater plan.
Yeah, he has a greater plan, and he's got to do this to get to here.
And that's why when we see when we see someone who has committed grievous
Right,
sin,
right,
and we in our humanity
right,
go, then he says, no, I
Yeah.
will have mercy on who I may have mercy.
right,
And then you
right.
should probably put a little codicil, did I have mercy?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. We think that person doesn't deserve mercy, but
Right.
God says, no, I'll have mercy on who I
Right.
want to have mercy on. Whether you do or not.
The
No.
guy from Rockford that murdered his 6 children because his wife had an affair.
Right.
Went to Winnebago County Jail. Major Dahl went to the jail to do Sunday service.
Mhm.
Simon Nelson committed his life to Christ. He did serve his life sentences and died in jail.
Yeah.
He should not have been out, but he will be standing, and that is it's a.
Right,
You get wrap your head around that.
yes.
But I
Right.
will have mercy.
Right, it's not
By
you
the way.
who choose who I should have mercy on.
And thank God for that, because we
Right.
wouldn't deserve it.
Right, right, right. So it's not a negative, I will have mercy on who I choose, it's a positive.
But in our eyes, it might not seem fair.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It doesn't seem fair to us, but God says, no, I know.
I am God.
And he knew from the womb that it was going to be Jacob.
This doesn't negate free will. It doesn't,
Yeah.
he still gives us free will to make our choices. He just knows what choices we're gonna make before we make them.
Right.
And so he can impart that when he wants to, but I think it's also, I love that he puts this in here because he says, it's pretty much, stop trying to figure out what I'm gonna do. Stop trying to figure me out.
Yeah.
Like, I will tell you what you need to know.
Yeah,
when you need to
yeah.
know it.
That's great, Jeannie,
That
yes,
is so true.
yes, yeah.
But I think I like because when you study Jacob and Isaiah, it's not like Jacob was really better than, because really the way Jacob goes about it, it's like
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
his character wasn't that
Yeah,
Stellar.
right, right.
But God already made his
But
choice.
God's like, you said, I'll work with this.
Yeah, God
Right,
already made
right,
his-
I'll work with this, because God knew that it had to be Jacob.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why couldn't he just have Jacob come out of the womb?
Well,
first?
see, that's my question. That is exactly my
He is
question.
gonna show he is God.
Yes,
And
God,
that's
it would have
what
been so much
Pharisees
easier.
say.
Yes,
Don't try to figure God
Right.
out.
right,
And
Make
we're
it easier
seeing,
on everybody.
we're also seeing God using people like Jacob and fulfilling, you know, his promise through people like me, you know?
Yes.
Like, how many times have I told Jacob? Not that,
well, how many have
you
you?
know.
I'll-
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
but
right.
but
I'll just
things
write it up
like
here.
that, you know, like how many times have I,
Right. Yeah,
you know, done something stupid or wrong or, you know, conniving or
Yeah.
whatever, but, you know, God still is using me and that gives me hope that
yeah.
I'm not a lost cause
Right.
because.
Yeah, that's the thing about scriptures, that people are so human.
Yeah.
They're all so human.
And how many of us have pulled an Esau where our impulsivity led us into, and our impulsivity drove us and we head right into the temptation and we acted on it without
Yeah.
thinking of future
Yeah,
consequences.
right.
And that's
Yeah,
everyone in
Hungary
this
is
room.
very strong.
For immediate pleasure, right,
Yeah.
right.
And think about the culture
Right.
today.
right. So, yeah, great discussion. Yeah, we can't blame either one of them for what happened. It's like they are human and God works with it. But God knows. He said beforehand, the older will serve the younger. Even though the natural order would be that Esau would have the birthright, but he didn't obviously care about it, and he gave it up. Okay. So,
God knew he was not gonna be a
yeah.
godly man.
But you see God's hand in all of this, in all of it, just clearly played out. So yeah, so we can understand that, yeah, I could be like either Jacob or Esau, but God can
Not
still,
really a fan of either one of them at this point.
yeah, not a fan of
Like
either one.
Jacob, though, he's a conniver.
Yeah. Well, and Jacob's got a lot to go through in the future that we'll see about, so.
Oh.
So, yeah, so we'll see that. So, yeah, so just trust God and don't be a Jacob or an Esau. Yeah, don't be either one of them. Just listen to God and be obedient. Yeah, be yourself. Okay, good. So next week we're lesson 2. And we'll see what happens to Jacob.
I know, me too.
Yeah.
I left my money upstairs.